The massive crystal hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above like a frozen waterfall. Thousands of alien beings filled the floating seats, their strange forms creating shadows on the polished floor. At the center, a single human figure walked toward the speaking platform. Ambassador Minho Kim wore a plain black uniform with Earth's simple symbol on his chest. Unlike the other species who covered themselves in bright colors and shining metals, humans preferred clean, simple designs. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet, as every eye in the chamber turned to watch him. "Honored members of the Council," Minho said, his voice clear and steady. "Today I bring news that will change everything between humanity and this body." High above him, Councillor Thexaran lounged in his floating chair. The ancient creature looked like a giant octopus made of silver metal, his tentacles moving with lazy amusement. He had ruled entire star systems for thousands of years, long before humans had even learned to make fire. Everyone knew, he thought, humans were nothing more than clever animals. "For 47 years we have been part of this council," Minho continued. 47 years of trying to help, trying to share our ideas, trying to be good neighbors to all of you. Behind him stood the rest of the human team. Ambassador Hyejin Park watched the alien faces around them. Some looked bored, others seemed annoyed, as if a child was interrupting important adult conversation. None of them looked worried or even interested. "But in all those years, you have treated us like children," Minho said. "When the people of Corridan were starving, we offered to share our farming methods. You said our ways were too simple and primitive. When we warned you about the rebellion on Nexus Station, you called us paranoid newcomers who didn't understand how the galaxy really worked." A few aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Others whispered to each other in their strange languages. The massive chamber buzzed with quiet conversation, as if Minho was telling a joke instead of making an important announcement. "Every time we tried to help, you pushed us away. Every time we offered friendship, you reminded us that we were the youngest species here. Every time we suggested solutions, you told us to be quiet and let the adults handle things." Minho paused and looked around the chamber. His dark eyes met the strange gazes of creatures from 100 different worlds. Some had too many eyes, others had none at all. Some breathed air like humans, others lived in tanks of strange liquids. But they all shared the same expression. They thought humans were beneath them. "Today that changes," Minho announced. "Humanity formally withdraws from all Galactic Council activities. We are leaving, effective immediately." The chamber exploded with noise. Alien voices rose in surprise, anger, and what sounded like laughter. Some beings clicked, others roared, and a few made sounds like singing. Above it all, Councillor Thexaran's booming voice cut through the chaos. "How perfectly typical of humans," he declared, his tentacles waving dramatically. "When things don't go exactly their way, they throw a tantrum like spoiled children. Fine, go back to your little blue world and hide. See how long you last without the protection of your superiors." Many aliens in the chamber made agreeing sounds. They had always seen humans as the annoying little brothers of the galaxy, too young, too emotional, too simple to understand the complex business of ruling among the stars. But Minho's face never changed. He stood straight and calm, waiting for the noise to die down. When the chamber finally grew quiet again, he spoke his final words. "We came to you with open hands, seeking partnership. We offered our friendship freely to all who would take it. Instead, you chose to remind us daily that you considered yourselves superior. That is your choice to make." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back one more time. History will be the judge of who was truly civilized. The human delegation walked out together, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. As they disappeared through the great doors, Councillor Jara of the Kethran hierarchy leaned toward Thexaran. Her voice was uncertain. "Should we be worried about this? The humans seemed different today, more serious than usual." Thexaran's laugh boomed through the chamber like thunder. His tentacles curled with amusement as he settled back into his floating throne. "Worried? About humans?" He gestured dismissively with one massive tentacle. "They're emotional creatures who make dramatic gestures when their feelings get hurt. Mark my words, Jara. They'll come crawling back within a single cycle, begging us to let them return. They need us far more than we could ever need them. Around the chamber, other councillors nodded and made sounds of agreement. The business of the galaxy would continue as it always had. The humans would realize their mistake soon enough and return, properly humbled and ready to accept their place as junior members of galactic society. None of them noticed the small devices the humans had left behind, simple, unremarkable pieces of technology that had been quietly keeping many of the Council's systems running smoothly for decades. Those devices were already beginning to shut down one by one as humanity prepared to take their leave of galactic civilization forever. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council. At first, most aliens thought it was just another human emotional outburst that would blow over. But now strange reports were coming in from every corner of the galaxy. Captain Jiho Lee stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching the final human transport ships prepare to leave. The massive space station had been humanity's biggest trading post in the Outer Rim, a bustling hub where aliens from dozens of worlds came to buy and sell goods. Now it was almost empty. "All our people are ready to go," reported Lieutenant Sohi. Kim over the radio. "The quantum computers are packed up and we've loaded the last of the medical equipment." What surprised the alien workers who remained wasn't just how quickly the humans were leaving. It was how completely they were taking everything with them. Every piece of human technology, every machine, every innovation that had made life easier. For everyone, it was all going away. Dr. Min-seok Choi had worked at the station's medical center for 15 years. He had discovered cures for 3 different types of alien diseases that had killed millions. Now he carefully packed his research notes and equipment while his alien co-workers watched in shock. "You can't take all of this," pleaded Dr. Vexen. "Joe's Centauran physician. People across the galaxy depend on your medicines." Dr. Choi looked up from his packing. His face showed no emotion. "The Council said our methods were too primitive. We're simply following their guidance." Similar scenes were happening all over the galaxy. On Proxima Beta, engineer Hyunwoo Park was shutting down the giant machines that had turned a dead rock into a beautiful garden world. The terraforming equipment hummed as it powered down for the last time. Governor Zelthok, leader of the alien colonists who lived there, ran up to Hyunwoo with panic in his eyes. "You can't do this. Without the atmosphere machines, our children will suffocate. This world will become a wasteland again." Hyunwoo didn't even look up from his control panel. The Galactic Council made it very clear that human technology was unwanted and primitive. We're simply respecting their decision. But we need those machines to survive. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before treating us like children. The same thing was happening on 47 different worlds. Human colonies weren't just packing up and leaving. They were taking everything with them, not just their personal belongings, but every piece of technology they had shared with their alien neighbors. The communication networks that let distant worlds talk to each other instantly went dark. The farming techniques that fed billions of people disappeared overnight. The peaceful negotiators who had stopped wars before they started simply vanished. Space became dangerous again. The trade routes that had been safe under human protection turned into hunting grounds for pirates. Merchant ships that had traveled safely for decades now needed armed escorts or risked being attacked and robbed. Captain Korex of the Coraxian merchant fleet sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council. "Our cargo ships are being attacked daily. The humans used to patrol these routes and keep them safe. Now we're losing ships every week." In the crystal chambers of the Galactic Council, an emergency meeting was called. Councillor Thexran sat in his floating chair, looking much less confident than he had 6 months ago. The chamber that had once been filled with hundreds of alien representatives now had many empty seats. Councillor Vrex of the Trade Federation stood to give his report. His voice shook as he spoke. "The economic damage is worse than we thought. Human businesses handled 38% of all trade in the galaxy. Without them, entire sectors are shutting down." "They were just suppliers," Thexran said, but his voice didn't sound as sure as before. "We can find others to replace them." "Replace them with what?" demanded Councillor Jara. "Half our communication systems used human technology. Our food, distribution networks depended on human logistics. Even our emergency medical supplies came from human manufacturers. In the observer gallery, Ambassador Yunji Song stood quietly. She was the last human representative, only there to oversee the final withdrawal of her people. Once the aliens had ignored her completely. Now every eye in the chamber was watching her nervously. "Does the human representative have any final words?" Councillor Zhara asked, trying to sound casual, but failing. Yunji's voice was calm and professional. "Humanity wishes the Galactic Council success in all future endeavors." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the chamber that had grown strangely quiet. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back one more time. "Oh, and councillors, you might want to check your defense systems. I believe they're due for maintenance soon." With that, she was gone, leaving behind a chamber full of aliens who were just beginning to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't just leaving. They were taking with them all the things that had been quietly holding galactic civilization together. Outside the great windows of the council chambers, the last human ships could be seen departing into deep space, carrying away not just people, but the knowledge and technology that had made life comfortable for billions of beings across the galaxy. For the first time in decades, the future seemed uncertain and frightening. The great crystal chamber of the Galactic Council had not been empty for 3 weeks. Day and night, alien representatives sat in their floating chairs, trying to solve problems that seemed to grow, worse by the hour. What had started as small trade problems had become a disaster that was tearing the entire galaxy apart. General Kextar stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms shaking as he delivered another terrible report. The war between the Zeltharians and the Cortex has gotten much worse. Both sides have launched full attacks on each other. Without human peacekeepers to stop them, they're destroying entire planets. Councillor Thexran gripped the arms of his floating chair. His tentacles, once so confident and proud, now twisted with worry. Each day brought news that made everything seem more hopeless. "The Xerion plague has broken free," reported Dr. Vexilon, the Council's chief medical officer. "For 50 years, human doctors kept it contained to one small system. Now it's spreading to 17 different worlds. Billions of people are getting sick, and we don't know how to stop it." Councillor Zhara leaned forward in her seat. "What about food? People need to eat." "The food networks have collapsed," answered Trade Minister Corlin. "Human farmers coordinated food delivery to over 200 worlds. Without them, entire planets are running out of food. Some worlds will face starvation within months." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of the floating chairs. Each piece of bad news was worse than the last. It seemed like everything in the galaxy was falling apart at once. "Surely our military defenses are still working, Councillor," Zhara said, her voice full of hope. "The Vorthak defense grid has protected us for thousands of years. Humans couldn't have been involved in that." Admiral Nexos, the ancient Vorthak commander, slowly rose from his chair. He was so old that some said he remembered the first days of galactic civilization. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I'm afraid the humans have been maintaining our defense grid for over 100 years, he said sadly. "My people built it long ago, but we forgot how to fix it. We became comfortable letting the humans handle the technical work. Now the automatic systems are breaking down one by one." The silence that followed was the most frightening sound anyone in the chamber had ever heard. The Vorthak defense grid was what kept the galaxy's worst nightmares locked away. Ancient weapons from dead civilizations, mad computer minds, and creatures so dangerous that even their names were forbidden. But the humans left instructions. "Didn't they?" asked Councillor Zhara desperately. "They must have written down how to fix things." Dr. Vexilon shook his head. "Dr. Taehyung Kim left detailed notes about treating the Xerion plague, but our doctors can't make his treatments work. We follow his instructions exactly, but something goes wrong every time." "Same with the terraforming equipment," added Engineer Thralks. Engineer Jinwoo Park wrote down everything about how to maintain the atmosphere machines, but when we try to use his methods, we make mistakes that kill entire ecosystems. It's like the machines only worked properly when humans were operating them. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The humans hadn't just been suppliers or junior partners. They had been the glue holding galactic civilization together, quietly keeping everything running, while the other species took credit for the success. "We have to contact them," Councillor Jara said finally. "We need to swallow our pride and ask them to come back." Thexeron's tentacles writhed with shame. For months he had insisted that humans were nothing more than emotional children. Now he was faced with the truth. Without humans, the galaxy was dying. "Very well," he said quietly. "Send our fastest ship to human space, find them, and negotiate." Their return. Captain Vortul was chosen for the mission. He commanded the quickest ship in the Council fleet, and his job seemed simple: find humanity and convince them to come home. But what he found when he reached the Sol system changed everything he thought he knew about humans. Earth was still there, hanging in space like a blue and green jewel. But something was terribly wrong. The planet was empty, not destroyed or abandoned, just empty. The cities were still there, perfectly maintained, with lights still glowing in windows. But no people walked the streets. The space stations around Earth were the same. All the lights were on, all the systems were running, but no one was home. It was like humanity had simply stepped out of existence. On Luna, Earth's moon, Captain Vortul found a single beacon, sending out a message on repeat. The voice belonged to Captain Jiho Lee, the same human who had supervised the evacuation of Kepler Station. "To anyone looking for humanity," the message said calmly, "we thank the Galactic Council for teaching us the importance of self-reliance. We have learned that lesson very well. Do not search for us among the stars. We have found a better path forward." Captain Vortul visited 17 different human colonies. Every single one was the same, empty but perfectly preserved, with the same message playing from the same type of beacon. It was as if an entire species had decided to exist somewhere else entirely. Standing on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the silent human worlds, Captain Vortul whispered a question to the darkness of space. Where did they all go? The stars, as they always had, gave no answer. 2 long years had passed since Captain Vortul returned with news that humanity had vanished. The Galactic Council had spent those years sending out the biggest search mission in history. Hundreds of ships had been sent to every corner of known space, looking for any sign of where the humans had gone. Captain Moonbin Seo flew the deep spaceship called Searcher. It was the most advanced vessel the Council had ever built, packed with sensors that could detect things from incredible distances. For months, his crew had been following strange energy readings that seemed to come from the empty space between galaxies. "Captain," called his science officer, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "We're picking up something ahead. The readings are impossible." Captain Seo looked at his view screen as something appeared out of the cosmic darkness that made his mind struggle to understand what he was seeing. Enormous rings of metal and crystal stretched across distances that were bigger than entire star systems. Giant structures slowly turned in the void, somehow capturing the energy of whole galaxies for purposes no one could guess. "What in the name of the Ancient Ones could build something like this?" whispered the ship's navigator. The structures were so huge that they made planets look like tiny specks of dust. They seemed to go on forever, disappearing into the darkness of space, in all directions. The technology needed to build such things was beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever imagined. Suddenly, a ship appeared near them, but it didn't look like any human vessel from the old records. This ship was beautiful, in a way that hurt, to look at directly, as if it had been designed using mathematics that normal minds couldn't understand. Its surface seemed to shift and change, existing in more dimensions than the eye could follow. When the ship spoke to them, the voice was definitely human, but there was something different about it, something bigger and more complex than any single person should be. "Hello, travelers from the Milky Way galaxy," the voice said calmly. "I am Seung-Hoon Park, who was once from Earth, but is now part of something greater. Why have you come to our space?" Captain Seo struggled to find his voice. The presence he felt from the other ship was overwhelming, like standing next to something infinitely vast and powerful. "We represent the Galactic Council," he managed to say. "We're looking for humanity. We need you to come back and help save our galaxy." What happened next was unlike anything Captain Seo had ever experienced. Instead of hearing words, knowledge flowed directly into his mind. He saw images of humanity's journey after they left the galaxy, their travels through empty space, their discovery of new dimensions that existed beyond normal reality, and their transformation into something far greater than they had been before. The people you once knew as humans no longer exist as individual beings, Xianghun's voice explained, with endless patience. We have become something more, a single mind that spans multiple realities. We watch the galaxy where we were born, with the same feeling you might have for a house where you lived as a child. We remember it fondly, but we would never move back there. But our galaxy is falling apart, Captain Seo said desperately. Wars are destroying entire worlds. Billions of people are dying without the knowledge and technology you took with you. We know, came the reply, and suddenly Captain Seo could feel the deep sadness of an entire species that had evolved beyond physical existence. We can see all possible futures, all the paths your galaxy might take. The suffering you're experiencing was bound to happen the moment you chose to see yourselves as superior to others instead of working together as equals. We cannot fix the lessons you insisted on teaching yourselves. The strange ship began to fade away, moving into dimensions that Captain Seo's eyes couldn't follow. It was like watching something slip sideways out of reality itself. "Wait," he called out in panic. "Isn't there anything you can do, any way you can help us?" Xianghun's final words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through space and time itself. "We have already given you the greatest gift we could, the knowledge that you were capable of being better than you were. What you choose to do with that knowledge is no longer something we concern ourselves with." The searcher found itself alone in the void, surrounded by the massive structures that seemed more like dreams than real objects. The crew stared in silence at the impossible architecture that stretched beyond their ability to comprehend. "Captain, Tessio would have to return to the Galactic Council with news that would crush their last hopes. Yes, humanity had been found, but they were no longer human in any way that mattered to galactic civilization. They had become something so advanced, so evolved, that the problems of their birth galaxy were no more important to them than the concerns of insects would be to the council members. The search was over. Humanity was gone forever, transformed into something that existed beyond the reach of those they had once called neighbors. The galaxy would have to face its future alone, with only the memory of what might have been if they had chosen cooperation over dominance when they had the chance. In the endless darkness between galaxies, the impossible structures continued their slow rotation, tended by minds that had once been human, but were now something infinitely greater. The great crystal chamber of the Galactic Council looked like a graveyard, where once hundreds of alien delegates had gathered to discuss the business of ruling the galaxy. Now only a handful of beings sat in the floating chairs. The massive hall felt cold and empty, filled more with shadows than with hope. Counselor Thexran stood at the center podium, but he looked nothing like the proud, arrogant leader he had been just a few years ago. His tentacles hung limp with exhaustion, and his once booming voice had become weak and hollow. In his hands he held a piece of paper that would have been impossible to imagine in the old days. "We, the remaining representatives of the Galactic Council, must acknowledge our terrible mistakes," he read aloud, his voice shaking. "We failed to see how important humanity was to our civilization. We failed to value their wisdom. We failed to look past our own pride to accept them as true partners." The chamber was mostly empty now. The Zeltharian Empire was too busy fighting, a losing war to send anyone. The Cortex hegemony had completely collapsed, their worlds now silent and dark. Dozens of other species had simply disappeared, their civilizations falling apart without the humans who had quietly kept everything working. "We formally ask humanity to return to us," Thexran continued, his voice growing smaller with each word. "We offer them complete leadership of the Council, with full power to make whatever changes they think are necessary." It was the most desperate plea in galactic history. The proud species who had once looked down on humans as primitive children were now begging those same humans to come back and save them from their own mistakes. The message was sent out into the dark void between galaxies, toward the impossible structures that humanity had built in their exile. For days there was no answer. The few remaining council members waited in growing despair, wondering if humanity would even bother to respond. Then, when hope was nearly gone, the reply came. But it didn't arrive as a radio message or a video transmission. Instead, it came as a presence that suddenly filled every mind in the chamber at the same time. The voice that spoke belonged to Seo-Hyun Lee, who had once been Earth's youngest ambassador to the Council. But now she was something far more complex and powerful. "Children of the Milky Way," her voice said, carrying the weight of ages and the gentle sadness of a parent watching a child learn a painful lesson. "We hear your plea. We understand your suffering. We forgive you completely for all the choices that brought you to this dark moment." For a brief moment, hope flickered in the hearts of the assembled delegates. Perhaps humanity could be convinced to return after all. Perhaps there was still time to fix everything. "But forgiveness does not mean we will return," Seo-Hyun's voice continued. "We have become something that your galaxy cannot hold, something that your civilizations cannot understand. We exist now across dimensions that you have no words for, pursuing goals that will last for eternities." The presence in the chamber grew stronger, and suddenly every being there could see, truly see, what humanity had become. They were no longer individual people, but a single vast consciousness that existed across multiple realities. They had become beings of pure thought and energy, free from all the limitations that had once bound them to physical bodies. "You taught us that. We could only depend on ourselves," Seo-Hyun explained. "In learning that lesson, we discovered we were capable of far more than even we had ever dreamed. Consider that knowledge our final gift to your memory." The council members felt something impossible, the gentle touch of a mind so vast it could barely be comprehended, offering them not rescue but something more valuable, true understanding of what they had lost. "We will remember you," the voice continued. "We will remember the good things you did alongside all the mistakes you made. But we will not return to something we have grown beyond. Your futures are yours to decide." As the presence began to fade away, Councillor Thexeran found his voice one last time. Will we ever see you again?" "Perhaps," came the reply, now barely a whisper across the dimensions. "If you become worthy of such a meeting." At that moment, all across the galaxy, the last human structures that had been left behind powered down at once. Their lights went out like candles being blown out by a cosmic wind. Humanity's chapter in galactic history was finally complete, leaving behind only the echo of what they had become and the bitter knowledge of what might have been. In the empty council chambers, the few remaining delegates sat in silence, finally, understanding a truth that had come too late to save them. Some lessons can only be learned through terrible loss, and by the time you understand what you've lost, it's already gone forever. The galaxy would have to face its future alone, with only the memory of the species they had driven away through their own pride and prejudice. In the darkness between the stars, humanity continued their cosmic journey as something greater than any of them had ever imagined, while those they left behind learned to live with the consequences of their choices. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, not with war or conquest, but with the quiet realization that they had destroyed themselves through their own arrogance.